Welcome to Energy Week 2021. This is our favorite event of the year because we get to talk about the future of New Hampshire.
We're excited to explore our path to 2030 with you through a great lineup of events that bring together business, policy, and community leaders across the state
to discuss progress, innovation, emerging technologies, and new opportunities.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about how we can best bridge the gap between politics and policy in the course of pursuing climate action over the next decade.
Your resilience and commitment to clean energy makes New Hampshire a better place to live and work.
So let's roll up our sleeves and get to work together.
We are all a part of New Hampshire's energy future.
We wish you were all here with us, but we're going to do it virtually this year.
You don't want to miss this year's New Hampshire Energy Week ceremony, so make sure to sign up today. See you there.
See you there.
Hope to see you there.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Melissa Latham, Director of Communications and Policy at the Community Development Finance Authority. Thank you for joining us today for a panel discussion on driving workforce development to support New Hampshire's energy future. We are recording today's session and we'll share a link with all attendees in the coming days. We hope that you enjoyed today's discussion, and if you have any questions for the panelists, please place them in the Q&A box throughout today's event. We will be monitoring them, and we have reserved some time to answer these questions from attendees towards the end of our program. New Hampshire Energy Week events are made possible by our sponsors, so many thanks to our apex sponsor Natixis and premier sponsors New Hampshire Saves and Coca-Cola New England, as well as Crest Forum, Timberland, Eversource, Nixon Peabody, New Hampshire Housing, Olivewood Energy, and Worthen Industries. Now we'll get things started and kick off today's discussion by introducing our moderator and panelists. And I will turn things over to Katie Easterly Martey, Executive Director of Community Development Finance Authority, and today's moderator.
Thank you, Melissa. Good afternoon, everyone. We see New Hampshire as a place with active and vibrant communities where we all are employed in industries we love. In an exploding industry like clean energy, the opportunities are broad. I am pleased to be joined by a panel today that's going to answer a number of questions about the current and future opportunities beyond and in New Hampshire. To kick us off, I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Astrid Blanco is the Talent and Culture Development Specialist at Revision Energy. Would you please introduce yourself to everyone who's with us?
Hello all. So as mentioned, my name is Astrid Blanco. I work in the Human Resources Department at Revision Energy. So I oversee talent acquisition and am currently acting director for our in-house apprenticeship program, which I'm totally looking forward to telling you about a little bit further on in the panel. I've been working in solar for about 7 years now, but I've been with Revision for 3.5, and I've loved every bit of my journey so far. So I'm definitely looking forward to being here with all of you and kind of sharing a little bit about what Revision's doing in New Hampshire as well as in the East Coast in general to kind of promote folks to come work in the clean energy sector, also live and stay in New Hampshire.
We're so glad you're with us and looking forward to learning more about what you're doing at Revision. Chuck Lloyd, the president of White Mountains Community College.
Thanks, Katie, and hello, everyone. Chuck Lloyd, president up at White Mountains Community College. We're in Berlin, New Hampshire as a main campus, but also have locations in Littleton and North Conway, New Hampshire. And more broadly, I'm here representing the community college system of New Hampshire. And just as Astrid's talking about talent acquisition, what we're trying to do is provide some of that training for the talent to feed the pipeline and provide some upskilling as well for folks in New Hampshire. So look forward to speaking more about that on behalf of my counterparts across the state, and also do some listening from my colleagues here on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Michael Berman, he's the director of New Hampshire offshore wind industry development for the state of New Hampshire. Mike, do you want to tell us what you're up to and who you are?
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. It's great to be with everybody this afternoon. My name is Michael Behrmann. As Katie mentioned, I am currently the Director of Offshore Wind Industry Development for the state, working with the Business Finance Authority and Business and Economic Affairs Department for the state. Prior to this role, many of you may know me from that position at Clean Energy New Hampshire as the Director of Business Development. In my current capacity, I am working to prepare the state for the oncoming industry that is offshore wind. There is felt to be a great opportunity for New Hampshire to participate in this burgeoning industry, one that is new to the US and is growing in awareness. And we certainly want to make sure that the state is prepared and ready, and especially has a workforce that can contribute to that as we begin to see development in the coming years in the Gulf of Maine. And so I'm happy to be here and really looking forward to talking with you and the rest of the panel on these important issues. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Ed Farrington. Ed is the Executive Vice President of Natixis Investment Managers. And could you introduce yourself to us, Ed?
Sure. Thanks, Katie. So Ed Farrington, I'm responsible for institutional and retirement platforms for Natixis here in the US. We're about $1 trillion and some odd dollar global asset manager, but uniquely focused over the past number of years on expanding the availability of environmental, social, and governance investment framework for institutional investors and retirement investors alike. I'd say probably more importantly, I'm a proud graduate of the University of New Hampshire in 1993, and I'm on the Sustainability Advisory Board for UNH, which really informs me when I think about this topic. So I'm excited to have a conversation and learn from all the panelists.
Thank you so much. So to kick us off, I think it would be great to hear from Astrid. She talked about some of the work that she's doing at Revision to really direct the Revision training program. It's an in-house training program. So what was the sort of decision-making process that led to Revision deciding to open your own workforce training program? And how has it helped your organization transition this clean energy economy in New Hampshire?
I love that question, or series of questions. So our industry is very much regulated by policy, politics, code, all of these different things. So in the state of New Hampshire, it is a requirement that if you are going to install solar PV, you have to be either a licensed electrician or an active apprentice. And an apprenticeship consists of two parts. You need one on-the-job training, so actually working out in the field, gaining electrical hours by working under a licensed electrician. And then you also need the education component of it. So learning the theory of the trade, learning to work with your code book, how to find answers, and how to work with new changes that happen within the code book throughout the various cycles. So most classes for apprentices are going to be taking place during the evenings after work, after they've been out working all day. Now they need to come in, do some learning at night. And this is a process that goes on for about 4 years. So the reason why it takes 4 years is because you need about 8,000 hours of on-the-job training, so working under a licensed electrician, and about 600 hours of school. So school, most people can kind of get that done like fairly early, within a year, what have you. But those 8,000 hours, if your average person is working 40-hour work week times 52 weeks, that's a little over 2,000 hours a year. So that's why it takes that long of a process. So it is a commitment. So after, a couple of years of sending our apprentices to school, we were noticing that, oh, man, they were just so tired, and it's so hard to have that healthy work-life balance that as a B Corp, we strive to have for all of our co-owners. And then it's also hard to say like who's getting what kind of education. People are getting things in different places. Things are being taught in different ways. So one of the best ways that we sought to overcome these issues, barriers, and also to assist us in recruiting was to start our own in-house apprenticeship program. So you need licensed electricians for any in-house apprenticeship program, and also to do the work that we do every single day, going out installing solar, heat pumps, batteries. But the workforce, when it comes to the electrician field, it's a little bit on the older front. You know, it's I believe at least age 50 and above. So there is a very wide age gap between those that are exiting the electrical field and those that are coming in. So really one of the smartest and best things for us to do was to grow our own electricians. So we started our own in-house apprenticeship program, RETC or RETC, which stands for the Revision Energy Training Center. So this has been actively going in New Hampshire for, now we're in our 3rd year. And we have had folks who have been able to complete the program and test for their license. Because it's a 4-year program to get your electrical license, we haven't had an apprentice who has gone in from start to finish as of yet. But many of our apprentices have gone through the last couple of years. And it's been really interesting to see that process and see how they embrace it. Our program is different from what you would mostly find out in the rest of the country because we have a hybrid model, which means most of the schooling is actually done online and it's a self-paced model. So that means that we weren't really impacted by the pandemic. So out in the field, hopefully you're also doing some hands-on training so that way you can learn how to bend pipe, do all these other things that you just can't learn on a book, much less through a screen. We've had to make a couple of adjustments throughout the pandemic. So we are doing kind of virtual training sessions, talking about different specialty topics to sort of supplement. And hopefully now that things have wound down a little bit with the pandemic and weather's getting nice, we are hoping to bring more of those hands-on sessions to fruition this summer. So that way we are continuing to supplement the education that's being received. So with our in-house apprenticeship program, we can attract more talent to not only the industry, company, but also the state. We're providing not just a job, but a career opportunity. And because we can control a lot of the content, the schedule, that also gives us the opportunity to really modify things for not only our needs, but for those that are entering the program. So, in addition to trying to supplement our workforce and educate, we also want to make sure that we are diversifying our workforce. In the clean energy sector, you're most likely going to find, white men. And then when you see someone like me, I stand out just a little bit. But it doesn't have to be that way, and that's not the way that things are in the world. So we have female apprentices, a handful of them. We've got female electricians. I would love to attract more persons of colors and try to see how we can find ways to overcome barriers for not only transportation, but English as a second language. So these are all kind of long-term goals that we're eventually working towards. But I'm very proud of the program that we've put together. I'm super happy that I get to be a part of it, and I look forward to seeing how we continue to grow and assist our great state in not only attracting, but retaining talent and creating long-term career paths.
Thank you so much. So many themes that you raised in terms of this workforce that, you're bringing to New Hampshire, bringing up through New Hampshire, training and really growing into that talent that you need in your company. There was one question that I thought, just because we're talking about the program, it would be great for you to clarify. Someone was wondering, is this internship paid? Is the apprenticeship paid? So as someone involved in it.
Yeah. So, this is an apprenticeship, which is different from an internship. So internships are generally short-term cycles, but with an apprenticeship, this is going through a full 4-year program. In order to enroll in the apprenticeship, you do need to be a full-time employee at Revision Energy. Hopefully at some point down the line, we can go ahead and expand that so you don't need that. So to enter, you do need to work for Revision Energy, but it is going to be a full-time paid position. So you're also going to get your hours, employee benefits, shares of Revision stock, profit share, all the good stuff.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thanks for answering that question. And as we kind of expand our knowledge of sort of the various opportunities for clean energy in New Hampshire and really go to have Chuck help us to understand some of that expansion. I know there's so much synergy but between what Revision's doing and Astrid's been able to lead and what you do at the community college in terms of hands-on training and also hybrid models. So it's great to be able to hear from you and really understand how you think the plans for future electric transportation will assist New Hampshire towards the path to clean energy future, and sort of how that ties into some of the things that you're seeing in the community college.
Sure. First of all, thanks for the question, Katie. And, as I said earlier, I look forward to learning from my fellow panelists, and I already have from Astrid. So this has already been a success here. Great information around the apprenticeship model. For us, first and foremost, we have several academic programs within the community college system that have always, I think, really infused pieces of energy efficiencies, clean energy, and also infrastructure. I don't think it's something we've always highlighted. Even before this webinar started, Mike and I were talking just briefly of, we really have to connect. There are pieces throughout the system we really need to infuse here. Speaking specifically about transportation, White Mountains Community College, we have an automotive technology program. We have a diesel heavy equipment technology program. We also have the commercial driver training program. So when you think about transportation, we sort of have a hub, if you will. One of the things we're currently doing, we just purchased a property in Littleton. We had been leasing a property in Littleton for about 20 years or so. We just purchased that, and we're planning to do some construction. Anytime you do a project, we want to be able to plan for the future needs of the state and beyond, not necessarily just what our current needs are. So what we're going to do is we're moving our diesel heavy equipment technology program over to Littleton from Berlin, really for the access of 93, the 91 corridor being right there. But also, as we're doing that, we could, again, we could simply say exactly what we have, let's put it over there. But more than that, we want to say, all right, what are the future needs of transportation going to look like? And I will say I've spent much of the last year having conversations, a quick couple of thank yous to some state representatives, Tim Egan, Linda Massimilla up in the Littleton Sugar Hill area, because they have a connection with the New Hampshire Canada Trade Council. And in Canada, as you're well aware, they're a little further ahead of us as far as some of their energy efficiency goals, driving electric, and we've built a great relationship with St. Jerome University around curriculum. I always say in higher ed, it's friendly borrowing, it's not stealing, and best form of flattery, and they're sharing their curriculum with us. And we are infusing electric vehicle technology, first of all, into our automotive program, which we've always done a little hybrid, but again, it's something we're not advertising, we're not marketing, to say, you know what, if you want to be able to work on hybrid vehicles, EV vehicles, this is something we can provide you. With our diesel program, our understanding from Caterpillar, Milton Cat is a great partner of ours, is that some of that hybrid technology is now finding its way into heavy equipment. So we want to be able to train the folks that'll be working on that equipment down the road. Is it 50 or 75% of the equipment out there? Absolutely not. It's a few percent, but it's slowly gaining traction. Same with a lot of these on-road large trucks. We have a great partnership with New Hampshire Automobile Dealers Association, understanding where on-road trucking is going from an EV and especially a hybrid, perspective is what are we going to need for technicians to be working on those vehicles come 2025 even, but 2030 and beyond. So that's what we're trying to do as we build that new facility. We're looking to construct a 10,000 square foot facility in Littleton and really look at a combination of things. I mentioned diesel heavy equipment around EV. We also will have within that facility welding, which does transition over, a little later we'll probably speak about wind, and I'll touch on that with Mike, and also all our industrial technology as well. So, for us, it's all transportation will have an EV flavor to it, if I can say it that way. And I think it's up to us to also do an audit within the community college system, because there are a lot of great programs. There's a line worker program, for example. There are pieces of that. There are weatherization. There are different aspects, but be able to advertise, market that, and work closely, with business and industry to really create these new careers and talent pools. So I think we can be doing more of that, and I look forward to speaking more specifically about some of those aspects a little later on.
Thank you so much. It's so interesting how each of you talked about both investing in the today, in the technology we're using today, but also thinking about what's that technology going to be in the next few years and investing in that future technology as well. It seems like everything that grows well grows in that way, where it's really building on the successes we've had and reaching towards those future goals and vision. And I think it makes sense to transition really to Mike and your thoughts on just that, because the wind industry is one that I think has been discussed for a long time, but there seems to be some really great momentum right now. It's obviously gaining traction in New England, and especially with procurement underway in our neighboring states. New Hampshire is not in the procurement stage right now, but with your position and the alignment that New Hampshire's made, it seems like we're on the track to future opportunities. What do you see those opportunities being, and how do we, in the same way that Astrid and Chuck spoke on, how do we sort of build on what we have and what's great about what we've done and build that bridge to the future opportunities in wind?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fantastic question. There are an exceptional amount of opportunities within this, like I said before, brand new industry to the United States. And specifically for New Hampshire, and again, building off the other panelists, we have a lot that we can work on right now. Procurement, while, within the industry is viewed as an important component to bring the industry to specific states, there is an enormous amount that can be developed, planned upon in the interim, so that we can find the opportunities here within New Hampshire. Specifically speaking, if we're looking at supply chain, right? This is a very, very large industry and has been developed out within Europe. And they have been the leaders for about 30 years now in developing this specific technology. So one of the challenges that the US, by and large, has is really not a lot of manufacturing of the needed components. Again, the training needed, the workforce needed to be able to fulfill some of the specialized jobs that come with that industry. And so in stepping back and looking at that, within the Gulf of Maine specifically, or I like to refer to it as the Gulf of New Hampshire, we have a lot of opportunity to participate in that supply chain that, again, facilitates the necessity for workforce development. So what's assumed right now is within the next 10, 12 years, we're looking at about a $20 to $30 billion supply chain industry just associated with what we expect will be needed for developing the Gulf of Maine. Now, there's a lot of steps that need to occur in order to get to that. Most importantly at the moment is the engagement with what's known as a regional task force for offshore wind that's overseen by the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. What they effectively do is identify, study, and then ultimately lease areas within within the Gulf of Maine to witness that development. So in that interim, this is where we need to be thinking on how we can structure our workforce to meet that demand. And so first and foremost, what I've been working on is the development of a business supply chain registry. So let's engage the existing businesses in the state, understand how they can either expand their business or pivot or create a new department that can help satisfy some of the areas and needs within the supply chain. So understanding what we have, right? That can go for both businesses, but also personnel, and identifying where those training needs are. Now, because the technology within this industry is actually developing so rapidly, we do have to make sure that we're building the right workforce for the right technology. And by that, I mean, off of our coast is very deep water, and it necessitates the need for what's called floating offshore wind turbines. So those are literally a floating foundation that then tie to the seafloor through moorings, and that is brand new technology. That is likely and expected to be the type of technology we deploy. So even if we are looking at the whole East Coast and what's occurring, the gigawatts of energy that are anticipated to be developed, we have our own sort of niche opportunity here as well. And so we want to figure out, okay, how do we participate effectively in both, because the need is so large, but also carve out a potential specialty and training opportunities for floating technology specifically. And so all of this is going to occur over time. This will not happen overnight, but again, that gives us the opportunity to set up the programs, to work with, Chuck and others within academia and training opportunities, to train welders, to train electricians for a maritime type of environment, which is very different. There is no offshore grid, and so there is specialized training that's needed for that. But I'll sometimes get the question of, aren't we just so far behind in other states? And really the answer is no, because of all these needs, and that we have plenty of time before development occurs within off of our shores to be able to start engaging the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 supply chain and determine what those skills are. And so, and again, moreover, this need of understanding what floating technologies will be and what personnel is going to be needed to do that. And so that taps on really so many different areas of our economy that even if you have one particular component, when you look at the taxonomy of these different sections within the workforce, whether it's maintenance, whether it's the construction component, whether it's controls, there are any number of areas and jobs needed in order to fulfill that one kind of slice of the pie that we're gonna witness. And ultimately, leveraging the existing resources that we have in the state to provide that, whether it's individual certifications or certifications for businesses themselves, that now that we're witnessing European material coming over, which they do things differently. They have different certifications, and making sure that New Hampshire businesses are out in the forefront of getting those certifications and being prepared when this ultimately comes. So I'm excited about all of the opportunity to engage every resource, but we first need to figure out, what do we have for resources? How do we leverage the infrastructure we have, like our ports on the seacoast, and then we build around that. And so we're in the sort of exploratory phase right now, gaining information, and then ultimately we'll be prepared for when that workforce and the supply chain is needed off of our shores.
Thank you so much. Really speaks to how you're really thinking about this, leveraging our existing companies, leveraging the talent we have in New Hampshire and connecting them to these new technologies. I think it's really interesting to think of how we can sort of demystify these large new technologies and really connect them to that strong small business, often supply chain businesses that we have in New Hampshire, who have already adapted and really taken advantage of opportunities, because in a lot of cases they're small and nimble and they're able to do that. And so it sounds like this is just another opportunity for New Hampshire businesses to take advantage of leveraging this new and exciting technology. And for Ed, I think this demystifying is the part that we look to you to help us think about. ESG is a rapidly gaining momentum, and more investors are looking to align their dollars with their values. We look at Revision, a B corporation, where we can see that happening. And I think that's where we see a real motivation by the younger generation looking to engage in this space. But I think the investment side is often mystifying for people. How do you get involved in this work? How do you understand how these investments flow? Can you provide some thought on how really the younger generation is engaging in the type of work you do?
Yeah, for sure. And Katie, thank you. And it's been super fun already to learn from the other panelists some incredible stuff that we talk about theoretically every day, like workforce training, and Astrid, to hear what you're doing, and Chuck, what you're what you're doing for the state it's really powerful to hear it. And then this new industry that can emerge and drive investment that Michael's talking about, it's just really exciting to be part of this. But I think it's important when we talk about ESG to make sure that we're all in agreement about what we're actually talking about, because the history of values-based investing, which was traditionally called socially responsible investing, really was a history of investors deciding what they did not want to own. So they would often say, I don't want to invest in alcohol, tobacco, firearms. More recently, they would say, I don't want to invest in traditional carbon-based energy. But ESG is fundamentally different than that. And so this framework of environmental social governance, I like to think about it as, what do I want to invest in? And how do I envision the future? And how do I consume information about a company and a management team to ensure that they're positioned for where the world is going, not where it was, and to ensure they're managing risks that are inherent when it comes to the environment, to how their workforce is constructed, or to the governance that they hold forth. How do they think about compensation and board composition, things of that nature? So what you're seeing is, as younger folks have demanded more transparency from what they're investing in, it's driving companies to produce more information about their policies around environmental social governance. And it's that information that is then Wall Street looks at and says, goodness, I can consume this and start to draw conclusions about how to deploy capital. Secondly, I think these themes are very obvious to folks when you just step back and ask yourself a simple question. Do I think the future of energy is carbon-based or not? Do I want to, if my time horizon as an investor, be it an individual or an institution, if my time horizon stretches beyond 10 years, where do I want to place my bets? And I'd say it becomes quite obvious when you look at government investment throughout the world, policy throughout the world, and the world we want to live in, right? The world we choose to live in and invest in today to live in tomorrow. It becomes quite obvious that capital should flow and is beginning to flow to these themes of environmental, social, and governance. I'll share, a couple other of thoughts on that and thinking about workforce development specifically. Katie, you mentioned it, and it was mentioned by Michael, supply chain. I think it's really critical for small, medium-sized, and ultimately large businesses to think about where they fit in this future and position their story as such. So I'll just give an example of a company that was probably misunderstood many years ago, and I won't name it by name, but it was essentially a company that makes valves for moving water from one place to the next. And that was oftentimes thought of as a very traditional business. But as people open their eyes to realize that in the United States, the infrastructure for moving water is antiquated. And this was pointed out by President Biden recently in his infrastructure proposal. If you start to now envision that company that makes a simple valve as part of a solution to a much larger problem, right? The transition of water from one place to the next, and about 30% of that pouring into the ground. And that's really not sustainable for this country or for the country we want to be. Now you understand that valve company in a very different way. They're part of a much bigger picture, and they're part of a sustainable future. And I think the same is true for energy transition. And it's critical that we begin to position ourselves to the investment world, whether it's private investment or public equities or the future of green bond investing and blended finance between governments and asset owners. Everyone has to understand their role in this future. And that's why this panel has already been really enlightening to me, is to kind of hear that conversation, whether it's training or these new industries and technologies.
Incredibly interesting. I think what you really speak on is sort of where is our long-term growth and success? Where's that potential lie? And I think that's something that we think of across our workforce development activities too. I imagine Chuck and Astrid and others, and I'll start with you, Astrid, and then maybe move to Chuck. You're making predictions about where that future lies and what your role will be in helping the workforce to really position itself for future growth and success. So Astrid, sort of how do you think about those immediate investments and how you're finding creative solutions for this future workforce, when in some ways there's so much places where you could really put your time and energy. How do you sort of think about those decisions and decide really how to create creative solutions for your industry?
Again, I'm super excited you asked that question. So when we first started the Revision Energy Training Center, it was actually started as the Revision Energy Technical Center, because our biggest bottleneck at that point had been getting enough electricians and installers to come and build all of the projects that we were actively selling. And we are a full service provider, so it makes it a little bit easier to kind of track how things are going, because we do the sales, marketing, product acquisition, IT, all these other types of roles. And PS, please check out our careers page because we're hiring. But that gives us more insight into, hey, this technology is getting much bigger. We should start to train more in this type of area. Or, hey, it seems like the markets are changing, or, you know, upcoming policy changes, politics, you got new administrators. So you can generally get an idea of where they stand in terms of their views when it comes to clean energy, so we can start to prepare a little bit. But we also change and adjust as things continue to change. So we have actually rebranded the RETC to the Revision Energy Training Center. So that way it's no longer just trade specific. We're also expanding so that way we do just general trainings for all of our employees. So things like bias training, financial wellness, general wellness training, also kind of offering, you know, other bits of support, you know, especially throughout the pandemic. Hey, how are you doing? Checking in, any classes you might like to take, things of that sort, so that way people are still being stimulated and challenged and have other things to think about versus a global pandemic.
That's really interesting and really speaks to that idea of our story is evolving. As Ed spoke about that story and what that vision is and how you fit, it seems like as you evolve this training center, you really thought of, how do we evolve our company to continue to meet the needs as they show up, and to have our trainees really be the future of our company. And Chuck, I imagine as you're determining sort of how to really prioritize certain programs in the college and thinking about what students need, that you're thinking of some of those same questions. So how do you sort of vision for that future of where New Hampshire is and make that connection to the programs you're running? What's that look like for you?
Yeah, I think for us as a community college system, just across the board, we've always tried to respond to business and industry. We try to be nimble and pivot as much as possible, and I think that's really what we pride ourselves on. For us, we have local advisory boards for each individual academic program. We have advisory boards for our colleges, and you know, we use them to, I call it the Wayne Gretzky effect, try to skate to where the puck is, right? You try to get in front of it, and really we have business and industry partners who are telling us where technology is going. So for this example, whether it's the automotive or the diesel heavy equipment, we have folks on our advisory board from Milton Caterpillar saying, look, this is the technology we're using. And oh, by the way, if you need a training technology, software, whatever it is, we'll help you get that to make sure when your graduates come out, they're ready to be our employees. So we have these conversations constantly back and forth. And they also put their money where their mouth is, frankly. These partners, you know, are willing to support us, whether it's through equipment, through training, providing, you know, train the trainer for our faculty. Eversource, for example, is one. You know, we need line workers. Guess what? They're helping us at Manchester Community College. They're getting polls up. They, you know, this has really been our model for years and years and years. So I don't want to ever say it's guesswork. We've got, you know, industry partners saying these are the employees we need. These are the skills we need. And as far as this goes, you know, the Automobile Dealers Association, guess what? These are the cars that are going to be coming. We need technicians who can work on these vehicles. They need to understand this technology. So I don't ever want to say this was a dream of mine by any means. This is what we're hearing from business and industry, and you know, as a community college system and all of our colleges, just try to really respond to the needs, whatever they might be.
Great. That makes a lot of sense, and I think is really this idea of responding to that vision of where we're going, but also using that sort of approach of engaging and partnering. And in terms of, Mike, as you think of the workforce demands in the future industry of wind, what are the key takeaways of how you formed partners about this thing that's a little far off? So wind is likely to come to New Hampshire, is something that we're preparing for, but isn't here yet. Sort of how do you form partnerships around that and allow those partnerships to really work towards this goal of having a prepared workforce?
Yeah, again, another great question. And I think it's really all inclusive when you look at the economy on how you engage individuals, but also how you engage the businesses to get them prepared as well. So it's not just making sure that we have, one individual that's been trained and ready to go. When we look at the supply chain and the different tiers, and we sort of consider about 3 different tiers, from tier 1, which would be the largest. And if you can, imagine somebody like a GE with their development of the turbines and the nacelle alone, just to give you sort of an idea, that sort of the big device at the top of the tower, that alone has around 8,000 components in it. And so you can imagine that every one of those components needs to be made somewhere. And that boils down to the businesses that hopefully in our community can participate in that. Those negotiations, there's a couple of things to consider. Those can take 2-3 years to get to an agreement with some of those tier 1, tier 2 suppliers. And so all of that tends to happen, like I said, years ahead of time. And then what you need in that, once that's sort of determined, or while that's being determined, truthfully, is those businesses also to be able to lean on resources like the community college system and what's already been developed to prepare their workforce for that. So again, while it's a ways off, all of that tends to be in motion behind the scenes, right? A lot of the news coverage and awareness is once those decisions are sort of have reached certain points, and we're now only about to be underway with the first construction phase of the first full commercial scale project in the US with a project down in Massachusetts called Vineyard Wind. That's also going to sort of glean a ton of information that the industry is going to be able to utilize on how we prepare for these projects, what items do need to be set into motion years ahead of time to be ready for that construction phase. And that project's gone through a lot of challenges over the years due to a lot of permitting issues. And again, whenever you're the first, there's challenges. But I think that's going to help us also figure out our timing, right? And how we can, again, engage in not only the Gulf of Maine, but also with other needs. Ultimately, if we can get a scenario where we can produce particular components here in New Hampshire that then go out and supply the global development of this technology, that has a lot of opportunity right now, given the current status, right? And it is becoming one of the major preferred technologies globally, and we're talking in the trillions. And so that does give us, more avenues to work towards than, again, just off of our coast. So we're trying to keep all that in mind.
Really interesting. And some of the pieces that are so exciting are just how these clean energy industries really attract a younger workforce. And that's something we've talked a lot about in New Hampshire, is how to retain and attract a younger workforce. And I know that's something that you've done a lot of work on, Ed, in thinking about. And do you have any guidance on both how to attract and retain a younger workforce, and how to really change the perceptions of some of these industries from, I think, the perception of 20, 25 years ago of energy being related to construction, and construction being not the preferred pathway for students, that we really needed to have everyone go to the 4-year college. So do you have some thoughts on that sort of the whole perception piece of this, of retention and employment?
For sure. So there's an app. So in the retirement side of our business, we do a fair amount of research on benefits and how benefits relate to acquisition and retention of talent. And I have to say, Astrid, you're hitting on these really core issues. And I'll just give a statistic that is a little bit wordy, but it will make sense. And just give me a moment to get through it. It's a lot of numbers to it. But this is millennial and below. 4 out of 5 folks in that generation and the ones following it, 4 out of 5 would take 30% less pay and robust benefits packages versus 30% more pay and no benefits. And one of the things they associate as a benefit is training to equip me for the future, making sure I stay relevant. So you kind of have this hierarchy of benefits. The base of the pyramid is health and wealth, right? Saving through a 401k or a 403b, and then a healthcare plan. But then you move up, and the next thing they're most passionate about is, are you preparing me to be relevant in this economy moving forward? And they value that a tremendous amount. So when I hear what's happening on this call, I say that you're all talking about the very things that will help attract and retain talent. And if you think about the cost of acquisition of talent and the amount you spend to train, if you lose that talent too quickly, that is a lost investment. And I can promise you that's a statistic that people are looking at when they're deploying capital, whether they're deciding to invest in your business or not. How long is that person staying? Why are they leaving early if they are leaving? So this topic of training is so much bigger than just what it feels like day to day. It's really about acquisition and retention of talent, and that will show up in the numbers over time. I'll say one other thing specifically about the ESG investing business. It's amazing, and I think sometimes we miss this, but one of the first firms to do some values-based investing is actually from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and it was founded under the brand of Pax World Funds and is now Impacts Asset Management. They're a global company, and they were doing some of these things in 1971 and have stayed on that innovation curve. And I think they have a real opportunity as you think about what UNH is investing in its sustainability platform and its data analytics platform in the Paul School. There's a real opportunity to begin to have more of those folks stay in New Hampshire as opposed to migrating to Boston and New York and London, et cetera, because of the flexibility of the workforce that has really been accelerated by what we've seen over the past year in terms of remote work. So there's something here for the investment, the ESG investment industry specifically, to be part of New Hampshire's future. But I think when it comes to just stepping back from that and speaking more broadly, what we see is this real desire for employees to feel like they're connected to a business that's meaningful, that's part of their community. And you see it reflected in the Business Roundtable's letter signed by Jamie Dimon and others a couple of years back, which said we're moving from an era of worrying about the shareholder to the stakeholder. You know, what is the impact of a corporation on the community, on its workforce, on its customers, on its vendors, right? This is a ripple effect that is touching so much more than just the person who's trying to look for a quarterly earnings report. So a long answer to a short question, Katie, but I wanted to kind of touch on a couple of things there.
No, really, really comprehensive in how you're thinking about it, and provided, you know, some really great connections between what some companies in New Hampshire are already doing, and then really ways to think about the future of work and building on some of, you know, the pandemic's brought about a lot of change, and most of that's been very difficult, but there's been some really interesting things. And as we think about how we bring those into the future, it's great to really hear that from you. And I think that is an opportunity for New Hampshire, which has strong communities and places where people like to be and connections to these beautiful outdoors. And I think that might, one of our audience questions is around our existing communities and the housing in those existing communities, and ensuring that whenever possible, that we don't use the energy, because when we don't use it, we don't have to make it. So one of the ways of doing that is obviously weatherization. And there's been a lot of talk about how to really look at this existing housing stock and ensure that we are building a workforce that has the ability to make investments in the energy efficiency. And you touched for a few minutes, Chuck, about some of what the community college has been able to do in weatherization. And I wonder if you could just speak a little more to that. And then maybe Astrid, as you think about sort of pairing energy efficiency with renewables, if you could follow up with Chuck and just talk about maybe what Revision's been able to do with deep energy efficiency and then renewables on top of that.
Sure. I mean, I'll touch briefly, and if you don't mind, I can sew two of these answers together. I saw Kevin Peterson. Hello, Kevin. He's asking about how to drive folks into trades programs and not necessarily just 4 years. So Lakes Region Community College has an unbelievable weatherization program. Andy Duncan, who some of you probably know, is just a guru. So if you're not familiar with that program, it's great because it's a program that folks can learn about their own homes or get into a profession. There's just a lot of exciting information. I just put the link over in the answer question there, just for folks to pursue. I am not the expert, Andy is, but that to me, there's a lot of just great information there. But I do want to touch on Kevin's question, if you allow me a minute or two here. School counselors are rated on 4-year sending, of students and acceptance rates and where they go. So I think there's a systemic issue to look at a little bit as far as a workforce development. It's about getting students in early, understanding that there are college fairs and gyms. I know because I go to some of those. There should be trades fairs. There should be ways for folks to come in. I know Sean Clancy's on the call. Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, they come in and speak to our students, our welding program all the time, our industrial mechanics program. They should be going into the high schools, in the middle schools, and talk about their careers. We have, junior welders programs. I have 8th graders currently welding at the Berlin facility right now because they are getting interested. They go home, they are excited. And oh, by the way, they learn what kind of lives they can have after, social mobility, and be able to have just a great job and a great experience. So it's about getting in early. It's about how we evaluate who is coaching, mentoring some of these students and the carrots we give, so to speak. But also the lifestyle. So, my brother's an electrician. I just have a missed call from him right now because he's going to do something with my panel this weekend. But he's somebody where you bring him in and say, what my life looks like? I get up, I go, I work with a great group of folks, and, this is a great career. I come down and make great money. It's the health and wellness benefits as well. But I get to work with my hands, and it's a low pressure, and, it's just a great career. I think doing some of those types of things early on and letting us into the schools earlier on to talk to folks, but really not saying take the focus off, but equal paths for a 4-year trajectory for the ones that want to do that, great, but also getting into the trades and make the trades cool again. I'll get off my soapbox, but I tell you, I've got our nurses and our liberal arts transfer students walk down the hallway, and our welders and diesel techs walk down, and there's equal confidence, equal respect for each, all of those folks, and it needs to start much earlier than when they get to the college level.
Thank you for taking the sort of how we encourage the younger generation to be interested, as well as the question about deep weatherization. Astrid, do you want to jump on and talk about sort of weatherization is something that's a little harder to sell people on sometimes, but is so critical to this clean energy future. So how does Revision think about that and sort of pair that into some of the work you're doing with businesses and homeowners?
So I am going to answer that question, but before I do that, I'm sure you guys have been super curious about what is this yellow thing that is hanging up behind me. So this is Sunsquatch, and they're our mascot. And yes, there's a much bigger version of Sunsquatch that exists out there. But Sunsquatch was created to connect to that next generation, to kids, to get them thinking right from those early stages about, ooh, clean energy, solar, this is awesome. What can I do in my own personal life to help save the environment? Recycling, compost, reusable bags. So kind of right from the beginning, it's not just solar and heat pumps and batteries, oh my. It's everything else. It's how can I reduce my food waste? How can I reduce my carbon emissions? How can I make my parents change their lifestyles and maybe go solar with Revision? So thinking about clean energy, weatherization, the transition to clean energy in the future really needs to start, as Chuck was mentioning, much earlier than when you get to college. You get them when they're young. You know, so many of us have memories. Oh, I remember watching this thing or doing that thing or watching this other thing, and that has impacted me in my life as an adult. So aside from, you know, using Sunsquatch to reach out to that next generation, we have constant events. We used to have more in-person events, lunch and learns, open houses, tours of, hey, here's the space, how things work, and here are some tips that will work for you in your home. You know, when our solar design specialists, our sales reps, are going out and talking with a homeowner or potential customer, it's not just how are things working for us right now, but it's also a conversation. What else can you do? Here are these other steps that you can potentially take. The weatherization question kind of has a little special place in my heart, knowing the history of revision energy, because our original founder, Bill Behrmann, he really started thinking about clean energy when he was working with a customer who wanted a super green, eco-friendly home. And I believe this was in like 70s or 80s or something of that sort, when no one was thinking about that. And then he was like, whoa, that's really interesting. I want to learn more about this. And from that interest, now we've got this whole company that is dedicated to the clean energy movement.
So it's right at your core. This last question likely, and there are a couple of technical questions in the Q&A that if Michael, you don't mind, and Astrid, you can jump in there and answer those, and we'll stay on in just a few minutes. But as a general sort of question, I think really important to think about, how do we diversify the workforce and really address diversity, equity, and inclusion in recruitment and retention? Astrid, you talked about that, about how Revision's really thinking about that in this workforce apprenticeship program. Your companies, do you think about that? And what are some practices you could share with us as final thoughts to the rest of the panelists?
I'm happy to jump in, Katie. So we absolutely think about it. It's and to be just candid, we think about it more now than ever based on the events of last summer, right? We had these two major news stories that dominated last year. One was racial and social equity, and one was a pandemic. And it really opened our eyes to some of the issues that maybe we had thought about or thought we had fully thought through, but we really started to realize there's so much more and there's much more depth to it. What we do know, and there's a lot of good studies on this, one of the ones that I think has the most history and therefore you can see trends with it, is Price Waterhouse looks at this very issue year in and year out. And what you see is this very clear correlation between businesses that perform well and diverse teams, whether it's management teams or just teams as you move through the organization. And I think about my own experience with that. And it becomes quite obvious when when you hear it, you're like, okay, how does that work? Well, it becomes obvious that if you just have a single pool of experience and thought, you'll tend to make the same decisions over and over again and tend to not have them challenged. And I hear Chuck speaking, and Chuck, when I hear about this kind of need and moment and opportunity to embrace trades, it's similar to me about this conversation of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is bringing more voices around the table that are all going to be needed to solve these problems. The building I'm standing in is relatively new. We were the anchor tenant in this building that was, I think we're 3 years into it. LEED Platinum certified, and I promise you that when people come in and talk to us, when we have clients come in, when we used to have clients come in, hopefully that will come again, but they're as interested in how the HVAC system works here and how natural air flows through here, how sunlight comes in here, so how we have chilled beams for cooling, right? Like they are equally interested in how this thing came to be, and that is this direct connection between what we do every day and Chuck, the workforce, and Astrid and Michael, the workforce and the technologies you're developing. And I think we should think about our workforce development and social and racial equity the same way, which is let's bring more voices and more experiences to the table, and we'll come up with far better decision-making processes that will save us a whole lot of time in trying to get to the future we all want to be a part of.
So rightly said. And yeah, if Michael, you want to take us out, and if you could incorporate in your answer, how many jobs do you anticipate as the peak in the wind industry? And I think, you know, what you spoke of is exactly the strength that Ed, you talked about, having so many ideas and those small companies in New Hampshire all connecting up to these industries is really what it takes to have the best and brightest advancing new ideas. We need that new thinking. Michael, take us out, and I want to just really thank all the panelists and those on the as participants for being with us this afternoon.
Great. Yeah, real quick, because I know we're out of time. To that question directly, we're expecting the industry to bring to this particular region in the Gulf of Maine tens of thousands of jobs, you know, probably around 20,000 jobs from an annual basis. You know, that involves a very diverse number. And obviously, you know, we have to get there. They're not just going to come. We have to put ourselves forward and make sure that we bring them here, or we create them here, because they don't just happen. And so to the DEI question as well, a lot of the major developers actually come out of Europe at the moment and require that their supply chain provide evidence of how they are moving in that direction. And so that's a big change. And you know, these are some of the deepest pockets in the world that are putting these projects together. And so that's, you know, that's a very significant item that should not be lost on us, because that will be looked at when they determine who they want to do business with. And then I forget the last question, but we're out of time anyways.
You answered it. How do we put ourselves in a position for the future, and how many jobs could there be in wind industry? Thank you to all the panelists for coming together and offering such interesting information. It was great to have this time with you, and we all learned so much. So thank you all. And that's the end of the panel for today. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, everyone.